The sun had barely risen over the quiet streets of Spring, Texas, when the rhythm of the day began to unfold as usual. Yet inside a modest home nestled on a residential block, a chilling scene lay waiting to be discovered. Neighbors watered lawns, brewed coffee, stepped into morning routines, oblivious to the fact that just a few houses down, something irreversible had happened behind a closed door. A woman who had once brought laughter to those walls now lay still. Her voice silenced her presence, gone. Her name was April Holt, and what had transpired within those walls would shake her community to its core. The news spread slowly at first, a murmur. Here, a whispered theory there, before erupting into a storm of fear and confusion. How could a mother, a caregiver, a seemingly untroubled soul be taken without warning? No signs, no noise, no alarm. Only silence. The kind of silence that screams louder than sound that day marked the unraveling of more than just a life. It pulled at the seams of everything people thought they knew about those around them. As the hours passed, authorities arrived, sealed off the home, and began to piece together fragments of a life abruptly ended. What emerged was not just a mystery, but a story, layered with heartbreak, deception, and a hidden truth that would leave a scar long after the cameras disappeared. Long after the social media posts quieted, long after the community tried to move on, but could never quite forget, April Holt was many things: a daughter, a mother, a nurse, a friend. She embodied dedication both in her personal life and in her career. Known to her patients as kind, attentive. Someone who remembered birthdays and made others feel seen. But beneath the outward warmth, there were unspoken worries, subtle changes in behavior, slight shifts in tone that even those closest to her couldn't quite decipher until it was too late. The discovery of her lifeless body on July 28th set into motion a chain of events that revealed not just how she died, but the quieter, more dangerous erosion of safety that had surrounded her. The story we share today is built on the recollections of family, the painstaking work of investigators, and the fragments of digital footprints left behind. It is a story that compels us to look closer, to ask deeper questions, to challenge the idea that danger is always loud or obvious in the case of April Holt. It was neither. It came cloaked in comfort, wrapped in familiarity, and hidden behind a face that once smiled in her presence. This is her story, told not for shock, but for truth, for warning, and for justice. Born on a rainy evening in the heart of spring April, Holt arrived into a world where her parents would often say she brought the sun with her. Growing up, she was the kind of child who looked after her siblings without being asked, who volunteered at food drives and stayed behind to help clean up when everyone else had gone home. Those early signs of responsibility and compassion never left her. After high school, she went on to study nursing, eventually earning her certification and working in local clinics where patients and coworkers alike would come to trust her deeply. Her days were long, but fulfilling, filled with the quiet pride that comes from helping others. She loved gardening, found peace in the soil, and often said planting flowers was her form of therapy. She raised 2 children on her own, juggling parenthood and work with the kind of balance that only love can sustain. Holidays were spent cooking elaborate meals, sharing stories, and laughing loudly around the dining room table. Her social media pages reflected snapshots of this life. Smiles, laughter, occasional glimpses into her challenges, but always wrapped in hope. April was not the kind to post grievances or air frustrations online. She kept her struggles close, chose instead to be a source of encouragement for others. Yet in hindsight, it's the absences, the gaps between posts, the subtle changes in her expressions that now feel like calls we never answered. April's family was the foundation she stood on, the people who knew her best and trusted her judgment. She had a particularly strong bond with her younger sister Amy, the kind of relationship where words were often unnecessary. A glance, a sigh, a shared silence was enough. They spoke daily, exchanged texts about mundane things, recipes, school events, inside jokes. Their connection was unwavering. Her children were her heartbeat. Each milestone celebrated, each setback met with grace. They were featured prominently in her life, never used for display, but always present, as a testament to what mattered most to her. April had ended a long relationship just a few months before her death. choosing instead to focus on rebuilding herself. Her friends noticed a renewed focus on self-care, new hair, new clothes, and a sense of purpose. Yet there were quiet signs that things weren't as light as they appeared. Her captions became shorter. More reflective images showed her smiling, but with eyes that hinted at fatigue. There was also a new presence in her life, someone she didn't speak much about. Someone her family knew existed, but never met someone who had slowly integrated into her routine, yet never quite earned her full trust when questioned. She brushed it off, saying she was being cautious, that she was taking her time. None of them knew that this cautious optimism would be the last they saw of her joy. That morning began like any other. April's alarm went off at 6:15, but she never texted her sister like she normally did by 7:30. Amy felt something was off, and by 8, she was calling. Without an answer, the calls went straight to voicemail, an anomaly that unsettled her deeply. By 9, she was on the road to April's house, knocking on the door, calling out her name. Still no answer. The house was locked from the inside. She used the spare key April had given her months prior. Stepping inside, she was met with silence. The television was on, a half-eaten breakfast on the table, and in the bedroom, April lay still, her body positioned as if in sleep, but her skin was cold and her chest unmoving. Panic set in. She called 911. The moments that followed were a blur. Paramedics pronounced her dead. The police began their protocol. Amy stood outside, shaking, unable to make sense of what she had found. The world had shifted and nothing would be the same again. The coroner's report arrived 3 days later. The cause of death was determined to be acute toxicity involving multiple sedatives, drugs that April had never been prescribed and that had no known reason to be in her system. Investigators turned their focus to her phone, her home, her routines. Her digital footprint showed a flurry of activity up until midnight. Then nothing. Messages deleted, contacts erased, a pattern that pointed not to a technical error, but to intentional removal. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's front yard captured a man exiting April's home just before 3 a.m. He wore a hoodie and moved with familiarity. Yet his face was never seen inside the home. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of struggle. Only a single overturned cup in the kitchen containing residue of the substances found in her system. Detectives now had their mystery, but no clear suspect. April's recent social circle was narrow, and none of her closest friends had seen or heard from her in the days leading up to her death, until one remembered a name. A man April had mentioned briefly a few weeks prior. Lyle Harmon. April's family was not content with waiting. They held vigils, handed out flyers, called radio stations, wrote op-eds, and kept April's name in headlines. They organized a community march, demanding updates, clarity, answers. Lyle's name came up more frequently, and whispers turned into theories. They learned he had a history of toxic relationships, that he had once been accused of emotional manipulation by a former partner. Though never charged, he had resurfaced in April's life quietly. Someone she had dated briefly years earlier before moving on. He had reconnected with her through social media, offering support during her breakup, building rapport, reminding her of better times. He appeared helpful, thoughtful, considerate. Yet there was something unsettling in how quickly he inserted himself into her life, her routines, her space, her boundaries. After weeks of surveillance and digital analysis, police obtained a warrant for Lyle's arrest. He was brought in for questioning and maintained innocence at first. But when confronted with evidence, his demeanor changed. Facial recognition. Software linked him to the figure on the surveillance footage. Data, recovery tools retrieved deleted messages between him and April, referencing medications, references that took on new meaning in light of her toxicology report. Confronted with mounting pressure and evidence, Lyle confessed he had entered her home that night using the keys she once gave him. He laced her drink with sedatives, hoping to confront her while she was subdued. But the dosage proved fatal. He panicked, attempted to erase traces of his presence, then fled. He was charged with second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and unlawful entry. His trial was set for the following spring. April's family sat through every proceeding, refusing to let her memory fade behind courtroom formalities. In the aftermath of the trial, April's family turned grief into advocacy. They launched the April Holt Foundation, promoting education around covert drugging, emotional abuse, and digital privacy. They partnered with local schools to provide seminars and developed online resources for individuals experiencing similar issues. The case spurred legislative interest, and lawmakers began discussing new protocols for digital evidence handling and consent education. April's story was featured in national outlets, sparking conversations around the silent forms of abuse that often go undetected. Her home community continued to hold vigils each year, marking her life not just for how it ended, but for the brightness she brought while she lived. The trial ended with a conviction, and Lyle was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole. The family had their closure, but the void remained. April Holt's life was never meant to be a cautionary tale. Yet through her loss, we are reminded that safety is not always a matter of locks and alarms. Sometimes it is in the quiet choices in who we allow into our spaces, into our routines, into our trust. This story is shared so that her voice continues, so that her children grow up knowing that their mother was more than the way she died. She was love in motion, light in darkness, and a presence too large to be erased. Let this be a reminder to listen to the subtle warnings in ourselves and others, to check in with friends, to question silence, and to remain vigilant in a world that too often rewards performance over truth. If you or someone you know is in need of support, do not wait. Reach out, because justice begins with awareness and every voice matters. For more stories that reveal the truths beneath the surface, subscribe to our channel. Share this video